I think it is interesting to see those cases of the people losing the lottery in that they deploy a project and their thing goes viral and then they get a bill and I'm like, oh, you were popular, so now you're in debt. That sucks.
Hello, welcome to devtools-fm. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and this is my co-host, Justin.
Hey, everyone. We're really excited to have Greg, Sadetsky, and Antoine Leclair on with us today. So I know Greg from Recurse. Greg, you're very, very prolific at Recurse. I've worked on a lot of cool projects. I'm pretty excited to talk about some of that. But also, you're working on this project called Disco, and we're excited to learn more about that today. But before we dive into that, would y'all mind introducing yourself to our audience and telling us a little bit more about yourselves?
Yeah, for sure. Extremely happy to be here. Hi, everybody. Antoine, please go ahead.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Antoine, and you said my name correctly, I guess, Antoine Leclair. So yeah, I've been doing software for a while now. Before that, like early 2000, I was an aircraft pilot, but switched career to being a photographer, like a press photographer for a few years full time, and then I switched to software development. So I've been doing that since like 2008. I worked at a few smaller companies building software for other companies like consulting. And I've worked on a few SaaS products as well in the past, like in the years like 2010, 2013, around that time. I worked on one that we sold like in 2014 for e-signature that failed against like the bigger names in the industry. I also started like a cart thing, like and yeah, it went great. Product. I left the product though, but it's been sold recently by the guys that were there, and a successful product. Then I switched to freelancing. I went with 10x Management, where Greg was also for a few years, and I've been with them for a big while now, since like 2013, I think. I've been on many projects with them. Super nice place to do freelancing, and they put you in touch with great clients. And yeah, since maybe 2016, I've been working also through 10x with a great client that's called idealist.org. It's the nonprofit job on the web in the US, I think. And it's a quite large traffic site, like the perfect size for a website to work on, basically, like not too big, not too small. Goldilocks website. And right now they are merging with volunteermatch.org. They are kind of swallowing them. It's the biggest volunteering website in the US also, so like a pretty big merge. And yeah, for them I've worked on big things, many small things, and yeah, here I am.
Yeah. So I'll complete it a little bit because our stories definitely intertwine a little bit. I've been doing software for a while. I also, for some reason, have a lot of friends who are pilots. I think they complement well. They're very calm, and it's great. I have like a really great friend who's a helicopter pilot. Just a great crew. You should make more just more pilot friends. I recommend it. So I did software for a while, and yeah, I did like a startup some years ago here in Quebec, where I am right now, where Antoine lives and my parents live. And I met a bunch of people, had like a co-working space for a while. Did like a master's degree where I did sort of computer vision and did like biology stuff. It was super, super fun to see kind of all that world. I've been doing freelancing kind of for a while, through 10x, which is 10x is we really get to say a really cool thing, Antoine and I, that we have an agent. And the story is that the 10x people came from the music world and I think it's totally public information, but like one of the agents represents like Vanessa Carlton. So it's like, they're like agents, but they also saw that interestingly, developers can have this sort of same sort of personality than like musicians, where they kind of really care about the craft and they don't really are like that interested about the contracts. They're like, yeah, sure, but it turns out that when you say sure and somebody's like, oh, great, like I'll make you a really bad offer, but you'll say sure, you kind of can get not necessarily taken advantage of, but it's sort of like, you might not kind of like be as, I don't know, like the contracts might not be like as well written or whatever. So basically they're an agent, right? They do that. And they do that for software developers. There's a bunch of people on the roster. I don't think we met like that, but I think we started working on a bunch of projects together. And I definitely also worked on the Idealist project. Just like really beautiful, fantastic, like as the name says it. Just like a great site, great people. And then, but also a lot of other things like recurs. Which I'm happy to talk about, as well. It was just as a startup, like doing some mapping touching lots of things is a bit of my story.
Yeah. It's cool to hear your combined stories. The freelance world is such a different world. It's like generally just keeping on top of everything. I think it's better if you work with like an agent or in an agency or something where you sort of like, you get to think about the craft or like churning the products. But the freelance world in general seems like really challenging. How's your experiences been with that? Like, it sounds like you're sort of working with a group, so it's maybe like a little bit less admin overhead. But like, what is that world like now?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, not only is it not for everyone, like some days I'm also like, is it for me? Like, it's just like, it's quite different. I actually just had a very like way more kind of like a 9 to 5 job, like at an incredibly great place. Had colleagues, had everything, and it's sort of like I was like, oh wow, like I'm getting to live the whiplash, because it's like this is the opposite of what we do. And so of course there's just moments when you have a job where it's like, oh, so many things are like now part of your daily kind of thing. It's like you mostly think most of your colleagues are going to be there the next day. There's like a lot of things that you stop sort of questioning or being in this mode when you're a freelancer. I think you're just way more of, you also are representing yourself. You are kind of like, you do have a brand of you. You are selling yourself. You're actually going through like a micro interview with every customer. Even though like the agency does a good job of like selling us and kind of like talking about how we're like incredible and everybody should work with us, but still you get on the call with somebody who's never worked with you and they're going to give you GitHub access. And so they kind of, they ask you a few questions. And so it's interesting because it's not like a lead code. So you don't get that pleasure of having to solve like puzzles. That immense pleasure, that just thing that I miss every day, of my life. But you do kind of get, a little bit sort of like, just get kind of a few questions. And so it's just interesting because then you look back in a year, if you've talked to like 5 or 10 clients, you've interviewed 10 times in a year, and we've been doing it for 10 years. So it's like, at some point I was just like, I guess I just like interviewing now. Like, this is just my new thing. Of course, when you have a job, a lot of people hate that and they just want to keep their job and do the work and not think about interviewing or selling themselves or having an online brand. So, Antoine can be like a freelancer, but also stay with a client for a long time. My kind of freelancing was also a bit more like, maybe some contracts were smaller or larger, or sometimes somebody had like an algorithm problem. I still remember a client who like just wanted us to build a better sorting algorithm. And I was always like, are you sure? Like, you want to hire somebody like sort? Do you remember? Oh yeah. Cause it was an app where they really wanted their users to be able to rank the things in an order of preference. But they were like, but there's too many items. So I can't have them like actually sort. So they should be presented with like 2 options and they'll say which one they prefer. And I was like, that's good. But then if we looked at the numbers, they would have to do that like 1,000 million times. Like, it still kind of worked, but didn't. And they were like, no, and I was like, all right. And I was like, it was kind of exciting to build this. But then once we got like, it was literally like it's like I emailed a JavaScript file and I'm like, goodbye. And they were gone. And I was like, that was weird. But, that also can be freelancing, which is fun. And for sure the sort of like, maybe more like wanting to see other systems and kind of touch a lot of things. And it's this feeling, what is it in New York? The open doors, there's like one day in a year where like you're allowed to go into like the sewers and see like the plan or whatever. It's like one day, like you get an Eventbrite and all the tickets sell out. It's terrible because I would love to do every item of this and they all just sell out in a second. But like for one day you get to see the secrets. And I think freelancing has that aspect. Like, I worked at Verizon on a streaming platform. And for 1 second, I was like deep in the Chromecast analytics code. And it was great. I was like I love Chromecast because of that. And I know a ton about like M3U. And, when somebody like is like, what do you think of Mux.com? I'm like, they're extremely cool. Like I've touched their thing. It's like they can be really trusted with everything. And that's cool. And then another day we worked with Wall Street people and they were doing stuff that I had never seen. So yeah, you kind of get a little bit of that sort of like, you kind of open a door and see a thing. But after the contract's over, that's it. The checks stop and the insurance, everything kind of stops and you're on your own again. So,
Also, I think the way you see work is a bit different, like compared to an employee. Like often, when I see more work, for me, it's a cool thing because it means I have more work to do, and like I get to be paid for longer. So like I see big projects, complex projects as a nice thing, and I'm super excited to attack those projects. Every time there's a new thing on the table, I'm like, yes, let's build that. And then the employee just sitting next to me is like, well, not where I work, but like I've seen that in the past, like in other organizations where like. When will we be done like building things? I would just like to relax a bit, but when you're a freelancer, you can.
That is interesting.
You're excited at those projects, I guess.
Yeah, that is a good point of view. Yeah.
Very different incentive structures.
Yeah, but they really both make so much sense. Maybe because they're so different. Like when we're employees, or like when I was an employee, I was like, oh, we should absolutely have this person come in for a couple of hours. It makes so much sense to have this ML expert come in. And I know we can't hire them. That's fine. I'm not asking for budget. I'm just like, I know you have $200. Like, let's just hire this person. But I also could see that, at one time I was like literally giddy with this incredible colleague who was like less than half my age, who had come from like Waterloo, and we had just like hacked the hex bytes of like something we had reverse engineer, and we were like shaking. And I had this moment, I had like calm Greg was like, this, like when you're freelancing remotely, you don't get giddy. Like you don't hold hands with your colleagues and you're giddy. It's like, this is a very being at work, office, the other person, you kind of trust them, you have this like rhythm. And then one day there's like this moment where you're looking at hex bytes, and that's a little bit of a, like, I kind of have to have a job to have those moments. Maybe, yeah. So it's just very different. It's cool to experience both.
Also, the way I see it, like, in the cloud, how you can scale up machines by sliding something. I see freelancers like that, where it's easy to scale up and down. And like the way I see it, you have to give a good reason for not the employer, but like the organization to not scale you out, basically, like to keep you. So they have to get good value. So it keeps you like up to date and like always proving yourself. And it's for some people it could be tiring, but I feel like it's also exciting to always be like thriving and trying to build cool things and doing quickly and in a cool way. So yeah.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. WorkOS adds enterprise features to your app without the overhead. Single sign-on with any provider, directory sync that just works, role-based access control, audit logs, admin portals, secure credential store, you name it. They have modern APIs, well-designed SDKs, and documentation that respects your time. It's built for developers, backed by great support, and trusted by teams shipping fast and scaling up. So just focus on your product and let WorkOS handle the enterprise stack. You can get started at workos.com. WorkOS also has a podcast called Crossing the Enterprise Chasm. It's really worth a listen if you're in a startup and you're looking at serving upmarket or moving to enterprise customers. Thanks again to the WorkOS team for sponsoring us.
Speaking of building cool things, you guys are working on a pretty cool thing called Disco. So could you tell us what Disco is and what led you to creating it?
Yeah, for sure. I'll let you, maybe Antoine, mention some of the things that led you creating. Cool. I think what is Disco? Okay, well, start there, because it would be really weird if I start the history of a thing that nobody knows. Okay, so Disco is a platform, is a bunch of code that's open source that you can use to deploy and host web apps or projects. So very roughly speaking, there comes a day in every developer's life where they're like, it could be cool to actually share my thing and put it in a place and not have to touch it, and other people can come and see it and have a URL. That's roughly what kind of Disco just simplifies. There's a lot of steps, sometimes way too many steps, in getting that to work and to stay up. There's a lot of kind of like checkboxes. It really feels like I make a ton of analogies, which I shouldn't be allowed to aviation wise, because I truly, am not like a pilot, but to me, it feels like a checkbox. It's like a list of checkboxes. It's like, as my whatever things off. Thanks for helping. Flares are down. I don't know. Are the gear, like whatever. You kind of go through a checklist, but the thing is, for every web project, there's a checklist. Oh, did you forget that this? Is there a thing? How are you thinking about a future thing that will inevitably happen, but you don't want to be thinking about it because now it just runs at localhost and it's really fun. And so once you go past deploying 30 or 40 things, it's extremely not fun to redo the checklist and to do manual things. So at some point, of course, like any developer, you start automating it. And so Disco automates most of the things that you kind of just are boring or uninteresting or, make your site kind of work. So that's that. What led us there, I think, so I gave a presentation at Recurse, and I kind of like thought, deeply kind of like what did lead me here. Because it is like I don't want to say weirdly a project that I care about. I care about every project, but there is like a weirder, even like more caring kind of thing. I'm like, wait, why does it matter to me so much? And it turns out I look back and I was like, I've been doing websites things since I was like a teenager, and I literally had a server in my room growing up that I know like inflicted like terrible irreversible damage on my sleep schedule. Just like I always have a fan in the background, but I had my own server. I remember the IP of that server. I'm not saying it out loud, but I 100% remember the IP of that server, which is also kind of a weird thing having a static IP when you're young. Anyway, but I was very lucky with that, right? And so yeah, we've been doing web things for a really long time. The story of how we started Disco, there's a lot of like smart things I will say, but the funny thing is that Antoine and I so wanted to kind of do a thing together that we have this Google Docs, which I'm very proud of. I don't know if you're ashamed of it. I love it. It's 50 pages, 50 pages of Antoine and me being like, what about? And it's like the most random, like nothing is more random than that document. Like at some point, like I know there's a lot of like weightlifting stuff because obviously, you know, one of us like actually cares about their body. There's like a ton of like we could track, and then at some point with like AI comes in and it leaves and it reappears again. We could have logging things. I even kind of registered maybe a domain that we abandoned. But it was 50 pages, so I know there's a lot. Like, there's a conversation. We're both kind of gently telling the other, I'm not sure about this because I've never, like, done. And so we kind of back up. But at some point, and of course the joke is, it was on the first page, which Antoine wrote. On the first page, Antoine kind of goes, well, I have been deploying a lot of things and writing a lot of glue code. I think that it could be a little bit automated and simplified. So that's kind of how I see how you came to it. But how did you actually come to it?
Yeah, so I can explain like the way I had this idea like in the first place. So at my with my client at ideas.org, I mentioned earlier, since like 2017, they've been hosted on Heroku. It's a nice platform. It's working well, and it got a lot of love in the past because they solved a problem back in the days. I don't remember the year, but like maybe 2012, something like that, when they started hosting like a Ruby on Rails app, and they simplified the process by a lot because it was very complex back then to deploy an application. And they came up with the 12-factor apps and made everything like move the humanity one step further in the deployment world. And Ideas was hosted there, and I would say though they've been bought by Salesforce, and they kind of stopped innovating at some point, and we were still using them. They were still working great up to a point when in maybe 2020, 2021, I forgot exactly when, but like they started to have a bunch of problems like downtimes. The support was not good, even though we had like enterprise contract with them, and I always had like to escalate the same question like 5 times before I actually talked to someone that knew what I was talking about. So I just started to look into like alternatives to host somewhere else, basically. So back then there were a few alternatives starting to show up, like Render was in the early days, and otherwise Kubernetes was around, Docker Swarm was around, and Doku, like the open source platform to deploy on your machine, other names like Caprover, things like that. So I tried a bunch of those, and it was never like, you know, the perfect thing for Ideas. Like right now, for that client, they have like maybe like 7 different services running in the main production project, and they have like a few different projects running on Heroku, and either like things were too simple like for a team to work on, like for example Doku, if you use that, you are SSHing in a machine, you install stuff yourself, and if you want to manage a team, it's not really possible because like you won't start to like add and remove SSH keys on the machine and things like that, and also it was hard or not possible to scale horizontally. Like let's say you have a machine and it's not big enough, like you cannot add more machines to it. And then Kubernetes, I tried that, but like, you know, like the size of the team, that didn't make sense to use Kubernetes. Like the team is like 6 developers approximately, and you know, like Kubernetes, everyone I asked like, oh yeah, you're using Kubernetes, they all said like, oh yeah, it's super simple to use, you should try that, like the hosted ones like on the DigitalOcean, AWS, whatever, like and I tried that, and it felt super simple at first. And as soon as I started to look into the details, like how to set environment variables, how to like do this thing securely, how to network, things like that, then the complexity was huge and it was almost impossible to manage for a small team. And I feel like most small teams using Kubernetes today, they just ignore about all of that, and they just like have something maybe that's not secure or something like that. And about that time also, like I think it was the Department of Defense in the US that came out with a huge like PDF of like maybe 20 or I don't remember the number of pages, but like a bunch of pages of things to look into to secure Kubernetes deployment if you want to make sure that it's secure. So even though like at first sight it looks like it's a simple thing that will scale up and it's great to manage, and it's like getting started is easy, but as soon as you look into the more complex things, it's pretty complex to deal with. So for a small team, it didn't make sense. And yeah, so basically nothing really made sense, and it felt like, yeah, maybe then like I should just write like some glue code that would like use Docker or something in the background, maybe Docker Swarm, and to deal with that specific project. But then like I decided to not move that forward because it would have taken too much time for that one client, and I decided to just like leave them on a Roku basically back then, because it made the most sense for them, for that small team to remain there. But still, I had that idea in the back of my head, like that, yeah, maybe I should write like some project that is that glue code basically that every organization has to write to deploy their project, and like not have to like do it all over again for each organization. And yeah, that was one of the idea in the huge list of ideas with Greg. And at some point, I decided, yeah, I'm paying like a few bucks a month for my own like personal websites that are just like static HTML sites, nothing complex. I just thought like, yeah, it's the holidays. Like, let's take some time and put that on a Raspberry Pi at home. I tried like Caddy, the web server, and I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. It's much easier than like back in the days with Nginx having to buy SSL certificate and all of that. You just like set your domain name and you have a TLS certificate set up automatically, and it was pretty easy to get this set up. But then like it didn't do all the like Git deployments automatically with Git push, things like that. So then I started to look into like that idea. I checked with Greg again, like, would that make sense to move that idea forward? Because it seems like a cool idea. And then we started work on that, basically the Disco. So
yeah. And also the context of Justin, when you were asking about Recurse, which folks, everyone should check it out. It's an amazing place where people go and spend usually 3 months and working on kind of personal projects. When I went in, I had this it's very scary because the 3 months go by in truly like an instant. And I was really scared I was going to spend a lot of meta time, like not doing stuff, but like worrying about my tooling kind of. And so I kind of gave myself like a rule, like, okay, I'm going to take 3 days. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to deploy every project I'm going to make. Because I did kind of make a lot of like, just like simple, small things I would deploy really, really fast. Sometimes it's like a little, it's kind of like almost like it's more, usually the concept was more interesting or funnier than like the tech. It was just, I just need a database. I just need a Python file, but I also need a place to host them. And so back then, because this was a pre-Disco kind of time, I spent a couple of days, also like looked at Doku, like kind of things worked or didn't work. I was kind of unsure, and it kind of made me nervous to bet on something. And so I took Render, which was the big Heroku competitor and still is, and I just like standardized my stack. And so I kind of made a file that I almost like just duplicated every time that I deployed like about 20 projects. And it was all just like, I'm just doing render. And then Antoine said a few bucks. In my case, it was like $300 every month. And my list of projects are idiotic. Like one of them is called Restaurants in Peace, restaurants.rip, where you can leave reviews for restaurants that died. That's stupid. That's funny. That's like a joke. That's like a chuckle, right? That's just something you just like, but is that worth $29 till the rest of, per month for eternity? And then I have like 10 of those. And so back then I was like, well, yes. Antoine was like, oh yeah, Docker, this will, I'm like, yeah, are you saying I could host everything on one server? That sounds lovely. And so, we had this kind of like real interest. And of course, this completely goes back to the server that I had in my house when I was a teenager, where I had Apache. I did not have SSL, definitely didn't get push, just FTP, good old days, like we used to do. And I just had one server, obviously, with my static IP. So so that was kind of the origin.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. So the hosting space has changed a lot. Yeah, I think there's this like classic trope of a lot of like companies building open source tooling, and you ask them like how they monetize, and they just say hosting. Like they have some like hosted compute product that'll be their like thing, and they'll figure that out at some point in the future. But we have seen like a little bit of a renaissance of hosting platforms. So you mentioned Render, which has been a big one in the space. There's Railway, which we've had on the podcast in the past. So there are these like Heroku alternatives. And then we also have the sort of like serverless world, started with like AWS, but like it's more, I think, often of like Cloudflare or Vercel, of like very much what is the minimal amount of infrastructure that you need to think about? How do you just think about the code that you're deploying? There are also like ecosystem constraints to those a lot. So it's like usually JavaScript, for instance. So if you're, more traditional, like full backend framework or whatever, there you kind of like are pushed out of those environments. And I guess I didn't mention Fly.io, which is another important one in the space, in the like kind of Heroku space. So you're talking about kind of like Disco being good for like personal projects, small projects, and it seems like the more like Heroku replacement. So like, how do you position it in the market? Like how do you say, okay, Disco is a good fit if you were thinking about like using Fly.io, for example, instead of that, you could use this in these cases. Like, how do you sort of like pitch it to people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, we're figuring it out. You see the team here. We've been both like working on it, but also thinking about it. But, I'm not sure that there's a perfect answer. I don't think that there's a universal answer, which is also probably not what you're asking. But I think the one thing that's hard is to say, well, obviously every single web hosting project should be on Disco. Like, that's just so clear to me. That's sort of like, it's good to go through this exercise, which is like, no, we don't think that. We actually are kind of like more also into the idea that, hey, there's a ton of options. I mean, you had DHH on the podcast, right? And like, they've got Kamal, right? Which is this great option. That's a little bit more like Ruby and kind of like Rails oriented, obviously, but quite close. Like there's a lot of like similarities. I was looking at their command line. I was like, oh, this is really neat. We have kind of similar things. They also went like with Docker files and things like that. So I think, this is more about us being the weird new flower in the Renaissance, the garden renaissance of like this kind of like all world. We are looking for like, what is the exact sort of like, because it's like, it's an 8-dimensional thing, right? It's like, you'd have to know where you are in 8 dimensions to be like, I think Disco would be kind of perfect for this. So it is hard also for us to like say it in the way, or just like right now we don't have that perfect elevator pitch, which is if this, but not that. The simplest, or the, in that 8D blob, like the one blob that I can sort of like see the most, is you're at Heroku and you're kind of paying so much that the ratio of what you're getting to what you're paying to what you're using, maybe that's not necessarily out of whack enough, but you're like, like that could be replaced. And then, I mean, because we've had the experience now of moving like big staging, and we can talk about that as well, big staging things off of Heroku, we kind of fit perfectly there because it's like, it's pretty much 1-to-1. You kind of only get advantages. The infra is still at AWS, so it's like reliable enough. The costs go way down. So that works really well. We're also interested in that from we're trying to make it work as a, is it a startup? I guess it is. Of course, yeah. But like the startup shape of what we're trying to do, the managed, like we're trying to also like sell a service. We're also interested in people that are like spending a lot, because it's just like, we kind of feel, this is also like how I go sometimes with personal things or asks or projects. Like, I feel like if a friend asks for a favor, I mean, a friend, you never charge them, but just like, I feel it always easier to be like, yeah, I do free things for people who are like in my neighborhood and my like, and then when like the giantest, most biggest company comes around, it's okay to charge them because they have money. They're making money, we're making money. They don't make money, I don't charge them. And so to me, it's this, again, I think we're applying a bit of the same model. It's like, we're open source and we're open for people who are, both hobbyists or, the hobbyist pro, whatever, like lots of sites. There's also somebody from Recurse. I don't know if they'd love to be called out, but they're great. their first letter. No, that's even too much. Whatever. Their first letter starts in the second half of the alphabet as well, I'll say. And so try to guess. But they're really amazing. And I know that they're running 70 projects on the box. And we just had this call where we're like, oh my God, like we were just so happy to be like, it's so funny. They were kind of looking at us, was like, yeah, I'm aware. Like, I'm aware of what I'm doing versus what I could be doing with Disco. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. That's like a clear case because, again, they're just paying a lot in management and everything. But on the commercial side, I think it's kind of like what fits us is this sort of Goldilocks that again, we might have to kind of define in a better way because it's a little bit of like, I don't know if people should try us first and then feel it out, whether it fits their case. We're even talking like, what would it be a better idea to go through to Kubernetes? And it's something like, maybe if you have like more than 100 microservices, like there are, I don't know if there's like numbers. Maybe it would be good if we had numbers. I don't know. But it's like, there's like a scale of a problem you're solving where like you'll have enough really complicated networking between your services, or like, Antoine was reminding me, like on Heroku, services can't talk to each other, right? It's like apps, like different apps, right? Different that you deploy can't, like they don't have like an internal network. And obviously other companies, like maybe I think Fly has like more of a notion of this network. We are way more of a like, if you deploy it, it's all kind of like, they all kind of talk on this private thing through the Docker Swarm. So things like that, I think where it's just like, where there's like a better fit is a little bit easier. Vercel was an interesting case. I'm helping a friend right now, Recurse, I think I can name. I'm sorry to be so kitschy. I just never know if people are like, oh my God, you named me. I feel just bad, but also it's great to name drop. My friend River, who's working on an instrument, and he's working on an instrument in C. The instrument is like just incredible. And he's recompiling it in WASM. And then we're doing like JavaScript stuff on top of that. And the joke was, he was like, well, I'll obviously just deploy this to Vercel. It's the obvious, like everybody does Vercel. And I was like very supportive. I wasn't pushing. I was like, yeah, great. Like I wasn't like, you have to use this code. And it was like, well, wait a second. Like, can you run a C WASM mscripton compiler as part of your build pipeline on Vercel? And like, somebody might be like, yes, you can, you stupid person. And so you're great. But if no one says that, then I am not that stupid. And actually, I don't think you can. And it was like, we're trying to shove this like, like this build script. And then at some point I felt really bad because I'm not probably good at whatever. I was like, do you mind if I just write 3 lines in one Docker file? I promise. And I am not good at Docker files. So it was like, I was really like, just mscripton, apt-get. And then when it worked, I really did have this moment of like, this is that kind of Goldilocks moment that maybe, again, we should try to like, really explain well, that it's just like your project is like complex enough that it's kind of real. I think GitHub pages still make sense if you're only doing a like index.html. I think our site, is it? No, not, we moved over to really dog food, but for a while we had like a GitHub pages for our official website because it's fine. Like if you're really truly like just serving completely static files, it's a great option.
Yeah, the way I see it, a bit like I said earlier, like I see it like a gradient. Like if on one side you have like a Kubernetes or like a totally custom deployments and like Terraform, things like that.
Yeah.
For very complex projects, for like big teams, like you said, like maybe like you have 100 or maybe 800 microservices that need to be deployed separately by separate teams, and they need to talk together, and that's a totally different requirement that like Disco doesn't try to tackle. And on the other side of that, like I feel the other extreme would be platforms like Vercel, for example, where you don't really see the infrastructure. It's not something that exists. And on Heroku, you could deploy there, but then maybe you lack some control, like for example, services talking together. If you want if you have like your web service, for example, talking with another worker to process something, for example, you need like a message queue to communicate together like that. Or if you want to do like a server-side rendering, for example, you couldn't have like 2 different services to do that. It would be kind of complex. With this code, it's pretty easy to do. So that's one thing. So I think that's kind of the spot where we are is kind of just like between Kubernetes and Heroku, I would say, more closer to Heroku than Kubernetes. And also I think there's a big cost saving in a sense compared to a platform like Heroku, because on Heroku, if you have like let's say a project, you have they call them dynos, but let's call them like servers, for example, or services. If you have like a few services running scaled to like 2 instances, for example, then you might have like 20 services running. You pay for each one of them a large amount. But for Disco, for example, you could run all of them on a single machine for way less than that, because you don't pay like the overhead of like paying for that extra padding of RAM for each of the instances. So that's one thing. And also the fact that like you can deploy, deploy many things on the same machine. Basically, I think you can save a lot like that. And I guess I can talk about like the staging environments and things like that. So with my client Idealist, what we've done recently is that we started with a staging environment to Disco. On Heroku, having the staging environment running with all the dynos, database, and things like that, it costs around like $500 a month.
Per staging
environment. Yeah, exactly. So we moved that to like a single machine that costs like a 50 euros, like it's for like a 50 euro a month. So like already it's like a 10x saving for one staging environment. But then like because the machine was still like so unused, I was able to add like I think 7 other staging environments. So at that point, it's like on Roku we wouldn't have done that because it would have cost way too much. But now it's possible to do. Like it opens new doors because it's not scaling up the pricing because you're using more. Because you can use that padding basically. So like the seven staging environments would have cost maybe $3,000 on Heroku, but now it's still like 50 euros for all of that. And recently I had more projects like just like proof of concepts and things like that, just to not prove a point, but like showing something to someone else. I just created a project, deployed it to Disco. It was super easy. No, the question of the pricing never came to mind because the machine was already there, already paid for, 50 euros a month, and I could just add the projects in like 20 seconds, and the project was deployed. And you git push, it deploys the update, so it's very easy to work with.
Yeah. But I think the sort of the question of the platforms, I don't know how kind of fundamental the business model is to the business. I mean, it's sort of absurd to say that, but it's kind of like, it really feels like Amazon leases you infra and they're like, here's bits, you combine them, there's atoms, more atoms, you pay more for them. If they're bigger, you pay more. But they're also, depending on the product, of course, that they have. But a lot of them, they get out of your business. They're not really, like, you have to assemble those things, but they feel more like Legos. And I think, the real thing with everybody else, a little bit, is not that they have like a suspect business model, but it's a bit of like the convenience got so convenient that they started selling the convenience. Like the convenience was the kind of the candy. And it's like, like they kind of, this is the thing. It's like, I understand why. And it made sense. Like git push was the thing that made Heroku. But it's kind of like, because it deployed fast, it's sort of the flip side. You were like, oh yeah, you like that? Like, was real fast, right? Well, yeah, you did it once. They're like, wait, you're counting how many times I'm doing that? And obviously, like I know they don't charge for deploy, which maybe I hope I'm not giving anyone ideas, but I think it is interesting to see those cases of like the people losing the lottery in that they deploy a project and their thing goes viral and then they get a bill and I'm like, oh, you were popular, so now you're in debt. That sucks. That's the opposite. You should have become popular and now you're poor. It's like, what? Which because at some point, right, like those limits are more. It's kind of stranger to I feel read a pricing page that has. This is a personal thing. I'm not saying anything. This is why we did our thing, because we find that weird. Somebody else might not find that weird, but like there's so many of these moments where like, oh, you're doing how many edge function invocations? And it's like, then there's a number and you're like, well, did I go over 25,000 or 100? Or, I remember Nolan Royalty, who you might know, who of course famously, did 1 million checkboxes and now he just released 1 million chessboards.com, which is incredible. He definitely, has a thing where he kind of keeps deploying these things that have like the most extreme scale. Like it's just a barrage of users and coming and actions. And he keeps kind of like scaling down his infra. I mean, he's like on a mission to prove something. I think at the end, it will just like run on a stick. Like he just like take a stick from a branch and he'll somehow like connect it to Wi-Fi. No, I'm watching you. But he for sure, I've absolutely seen him think and talk. And I'm even part of a talk that he gives because at some point he tells me that this thing is going really well. And I go, how's your bandwidth, buddy? You're at DigitalOcean. There's a number that you're not allowed to hit. There is a number of bytes which we also have bandwidth limits. I'm not saying this is some sort of like we have a magical deal with God where like bandwidth doesn't count, but he was just like, that was one thing where he was not allowed. Like it's kind of like the nuclear reactor, like you're kind of turning the knobs. There is a red zone where you suddenly start getting billed. And of course, other platforms are just like, they've maybe regulated those things to either happen more often or to happen quickly enough for a big company that you kind of have to get on the horn. And then of course you get it like into a whole pricing conversation, which is very, very different. So anyway, so it's like the pricing is sort of a part of it. And then the flip side, I guess, is just people wanting to own their infra or not think about it. And there's more answers. Maybe I've talked for too long and you probably have an interesting question. So I'll stop right after that. But I think we've definitely also just in Canada, because for like 3 seconds, Amazon was like kind of like the big enemy here for a second. They fired like a ton of people. It was like a really big thing. So a lot of people kind of turned on them. But it was interesting because the conversation kind of flipped to like, well, like we did host all of our data on a weird American server. Like everyone also just kind of had this moment of like, yeah, I get like, and I'm not saying like people didn't realize that before, but I know I just talked to somebody who's like in the healthcare world and he's like, yeah, of course our data is hosted in a data center in Quebec. Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course we know where our data is. Those things kind of matter. And so the use cases where you were telling me about this insurance company that is like very aware that you don't just go Amazon and then you don't think about it. That's just like, you can't not think about where your infra is or what your infra is. These thoughts are kind of like it's a whatever.
Yeah, also like referring to that insurance company you're talking about, that we talked about just before the call. So that's someone I know where they use many clouds like Google Cloud and Amazon and many providers like that, and they tried to switch to only Amazon to get a deal, basically, because Amazon does that when you spend like 20 millions a year, and they did that. But then like it still costs a lot of money to go on the cloud compared to if they moved back to on-premise like they were like 10 years ago, for example. Yeah. So like the big move to the cloud for big companies, it was sold as only magic, but now the magic comes with an invoice. And a lot of companies are starting to think that, yeah, maybe they could move some or all of their infrastructure back to their own data center. So there's a need for everything, basically, what I'm saying. Not saying that we should like all be on-premise and have our own servers, but I think there's for some organizations, it could make sense to be on-premise. Some other organizations be on AWS. Some other organizations be like on platforms like on Heroku that does everything, or Vercel that kind of hides all of that for you.
Yeah. I think the mix and match is sort of like it's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of the answer, maybe.
Yeah, when I was looking at your guys' docs, it really reminded me of like early Zeit with their Now project, like kind of the same, similar, like very simple JSON, one command, deploy everything. I love how it's like, as you said, you can have like whatever infrastructure you want. Like even on your website, you're like, here's how to host it on a Raspberry Pi and the 100 steps that you would need to take to do that. Yeah,
which I like. This is where I don't know if it's the pilot or the reasonable or just me being like really, really some days having just like really wanting to, the freelancer brain wanting to do a new thing. I am like, I know we could make that Raspberry Pi experience so magical that it could be like an SD card that you get from us. You plug it in and your thing is like fully discoified and it's great. And Antoine, I can even feel he like wants to like again intervene because he's done that many times. I'm not announcing anything that we're going to do that. And we're announcing it. No, but imagine. The truth is, yeah, the Raspberry Pis are, they are a lot of work, and it's sort of like, it's not that they're not our focus. We kind of like, we adore that it works, and we have like, I'm staring at 2 right now that are hosting a couple of things. But it is like, yeah, there's also like the reality. Like I've had a couple at Recurse, and I've already gone through like SD cards. And at some point, Antoine was like, we're going to use an SSD here. And like, we are using an SSD. So there was a Raspberry Pi at Recurse that's hosting like around 50 people's projects. It's something that we set up like way back. And it's been super, super fun for people to like try it out. And it's just like, it was like one 8 gig RAM Raspberry Pi running 50 things. So it's for a lot of like dogfooding and kind of having fun. It was great. But, it runs an SSD, which is like quite a challenge to put in. I once bought an SSD for a new Raspberry Pi, and it came with 2 cables labeled version 1, version 2. They looked identical. And I was like, surely that's like a joke. And I plugged the wrong cable, and then the thing booted, and then the errors were like really, those like deep, you didn't install the right, like it was like really cool to see, because that really brought me back to like, I had like really super scared, like, am I corrupting the data? What am I doing? Then I had to replace the cable. The other cable worked way better. And I was like, yeah, this is what people do for a living. Like, I'm not gonna like, this is a little bit past the line of like, run your thing with us. I'm like, maybe not to that extent where, obviously like if there's a storm, your thing goes down. So Raspberry Pis, I'm again announcing, it's like, it's fun. It's almost like it's perfect for tinkering. And I think almost to answer why there's 100 steps, this is really like a sour grapes kind of answer, but like, it's almost like you have to go through the 100 steps. Like it has to be worth it. Like, once you go, you really feel good about yourself. That's how it should feel like. Because at the end, you should be like, yeah, I did a hell of a lot of things here. It's almost, we don't want to make it too simple, but in reality, we would want to make it really simpler. Just not right now. Join the team. Work on that.
At the same time, it's surprising the amount of services you can host on a Raspberry Pi. Like it's 8 gig of RAM, and like like you said at Recurse, like there's like 50 projects, and
backend projects, like
backend projects, and it's still using like maybe like one of the 8 gigs. So like there could be so many more projects on a single small machine like that.
Yeah,
but still, it's for like hobby things. Like I have my personal websites on my Raspberry Pi at home, and like it's connected to a backup, like battery backup, and my modem as well is on a battery backup like that. So like if there's a power outage, it's still working.
Couple hours,
but still, like you never know. Like you're not home for a few weeks, and then there's something going up. Like it's not like a production server you can run at home like that. It's more for fun and like for like projects that you would have like paid $300 a month.
Perfect for me. Absolutely. Yeah. Did I answer the question? I feel like we again went off on so many tangents.
I think we got to it.
Yeah, you sure? Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not complaining. I think if the it's like we hear a word and we're like, oh yeah, that time that I, and then this is like
okay.
We're just very excited to be here. Did you see there's like a guy who like he like scams scammers, like he's like super popular, right? He's like huge now, and he does these like fake Coinbase things, or like the scammer things are in the real Coinbase, and it's incredible. Now he's like partnered with Coinbase or some other like crypto thing. And at some point, he got the scammer to read lines that were like, because he was like pretending to be scammed. So he was like, "Oh, is Coinbase good?" And then the scammer was like, "Oh yeah, Coinbase is really reliable." And Coinbase was like a sponsor, and he got the scammer to do the ad read. And I was like, no one will top that. So if you ever wanted us to somehow make an ad read without, I'm just opening the door to like something that we could do here, but we don't have to do that. I'm just really excited.
You already did
was it Coinbase, really?
You did a Mux.com spill earlier, and we had Mux as a sponsor in the past, so that was like
oh my god, yeah, no. Oh my god, yeah, no, this was no, and it's so like, it's from the heart. Mux is like, seriously, I am not paid to say how much I love them. I really do. Okay, that's great.
So you're working on Disco Cloud, so it's a managed service for deploying Disco apps, and Disco itself is an open source project. So there's this fundamental tension that you have when you're building an open source project and you're wanting people to use it and do it themselves, and then you're like, oh, or you can pay us to do it. There's this like usability question. Is like, if you make it incredibly like trivial for someone to do it themselves, and it's significantly cheaper than what you would charge them to host it for them, how do you balance that, make it easy to gain adoption without like undercutting your sort of like value add on your hosted platform? What does that look like for y'all?
Yeah, it's a huge conversation. I think it touches on all of these like stories and topics of, projects having one license and then realizing that it was too easy to use them. I'm kind of thinking like Mapbox was an interesting example, right? Where like the library was like quite open source, and it turned out that their business model, I'm not saying it was just that, but a part of their business model was to host things on an S3 bucket for you. People figured that out pretty quickly. And so if you hosted the kind of vector data, which itself was from OpenStreetMap, you could not use the part that Mapbox was hoping to use to make money, and use their library, which is incredible. And Mapbox didn't like that. And then at some point they fully changed the license, and actually you are not allowed to use the Mapbox library today, the JavaScript code, if you're not hosting it with them, if you're not giving them money. So it's like, whatever version of open source is, that's what they're doing right now. And of course, there was a big fork, and it was MapLibre and everything. Mapbox are great, but that was a big change. So I'm just kind of bringing it up because it is things that we've like all kind of like bounced each other on. Often it was like, oh, are we them? Like what version of bad guys we want to be, or what version of like guys we want to be in there? Like we think about Mongo. It's like Mongo seems to have a business running the Mongo cloud. I know of a gigantic customer. Am I allowed? It's just, them, like they're that big. 100% everybody knows who they are, and they are like a Mongo customer, which I'm like, how many numbers is that? Like just probably 9 numbers like worth of dollars per month. And it also makes sense. Yeah, you probably don't want to be like running like the core database, or it's really nice that a whole other team of 1,000 other developers are like really, really worried about your data not like expiring and dying. So that's interesting. But Mongo still, as far as I know, exists as an open source thing. And it's interesting, like when you log into the Mongo cloud, there's these moments where they're like, oh, like, are you using Mongo? And it's like, yeah, I'm not using Mongo, but are you using Mongo Plus, Atlas, Premium? And you're like, no, but I'm not giving you money. It's like, no problem, but you could be doing AI and we could be optimizing. You're like, oh, that's cool. You find another cool way of making money. So where are we in there? I'm not trying to not answer by talking about everybody else here. I promise. I think that we, right now, like what we're trying to do is that we care with, our MIT license. We care about everything that we're working on being open source and being available. We care that people use it and like it. We care about not just dog fooding, but the thing that like it is in the open. Like we are in this business because we are, on so many, so many people before us worked and contributed and opened their code. And it's like, I think that makes a lot of sense. We want that. What I think we're trying to go for is to make just it even easier for people who have more of, again, this sort of like what the commercial needs feels like. It's sort of like, could we just trace the exact line where we're not inconveniencing free or open source users because we want them to give us money, but rather we drew the line where people were about to give us money anyway. Like a company, I think, companies that like rely on their infra and don't necessarily have like their whole kind of, hosting staff kind of on board and DevOps, they might just be like, kind of like, they might not be interested in this thing being so open source that they don't even have a way of, outside of some like sponsorship that's kind of pretty complicated to put on place. And, you have to be kind of SQLite to get a level where like, like Apple's giving you like $1 million because it's on every phone. So like, that's just like, we're not there, obviously. So I think right now we're kind of like drawing that line, but it's very, I think we would just kind of be sad with ourselves. This is kind of like, and I hope this, not that this haunts me, but like, please feel free to clip it and show it in my face in 50 years if I'm wearing like a weird hat and I'm like, ha ha ha, you thought you could deploy. No, your third deploy, like, is like just, it charges your credit card. It's like, I kind of feel like, why would we make it more annoying for users to use? And clearly, like, why would we tie a business model to a thing that's all about like automation and making it simple? So yeah, it was kind of, yes, it's like, it's almost boring how we're like, I guess we'll just host Disco and charge for that. Like in a way, it's kind of like, it's almost too obvious, but it does feel good in the sense that it doesn't feel like what we're doing kind of doesn't have anything to do with the software, right? It's like, even looking at like what happened with WordPress and WP Engine, in a way, that's exactly what happened. That was almost funny for me to read. I'm like, WordPress was open source. And then, and I'm not saying like the whole story just like, is like really just summarizes to this like single thing. Like, of course, this fight is like, again, like so many things happen, but it is be like, yeah, those other guys were just hosting your code, like they offered hosting, your code was open. What are we talking about? And so in a way, I'm like, here's like a, maybe I can promise that, or challenge future Greg to like, I would be happy if somebody offered a commercial Disco cloud hosting, and then you might be out. But what about Elasticsearch? They didn't like when Amazon did that to them, and then it's like we're figuring it out. But we went with that again because it's like I don't think we wanted to just launch a thing that you could kind of like never see or tinker with. I think we just still like code too much to I think I would personally, even though Antoine wrote most of the code, I would still rather be remembered for my, GitHub Copilot generated, code in the command line tool, which is where I usually write the code. And maybe, I don't know, I won't speak for Antoine, but I would rather be remembered for that. And then for somebody to be like, yeah, like it seems really good. Like if I get run over by a bus, but somebody was like, Disco sure works well. Thanks past dead Greg. That feels way better as a tribute than like, Greg sure has my credit card number. Like, will anyone say that at my funeral with like, with a little tear? But I can point to people who are hosting their things on Disco, and they seem to be happy, and that's kind of enough in a certain way. That feels enough of a whole. Is that?
Also, I would add maybe that for paying customers, like we are there for support, and also we are like hearing what their needs are. So there are a few things that can't be done without an external service. For example, like if they want like a team management, or if they want like a enterprise single sign-on, things like that. SAML or whatever, so the things like that we could provide through paid subscription, things like that. But it would be harder to implement like in a daemon, for example. That would like if for example you want to control many machines and like have teams that can access only a set of machines, things like that, then like it makes more sense to be hosted somewhere else. And that somewhere else, I feel like is the platform that we charge for. That's one thing. And on the flip side of the open source thing is like Greg mentioned, like the stories of like big names starting to host for like your code because it's open source. Then you're kind of so like I feel like we talked about this a lot, Greg and I, and we still feel like it's a great choice to have went with an MIT license for the core domain, and we definitely want to make it as easy as possible to use. And for me, it's definitely like the way I see it, if we had like 1 million developers using the open source version for their hobby project, then like it would just make sense for them when they work in their day job to when they want to host a project somewhere, they would probably want to use Disco as well because they're used to that tool. And then because then in that context, they would have the need for enterprise features like team management and things like that. Then it would make sense to pay in that context, but not for the other projects where they host it on either small servers at $5 a month or on the Raspberry Pi at home for free.
Yeah. Or what is it? SOC 2, SOC 3, all the SOCs, like that's harder to guarantee, but someone might care about that a lot. And so that just, again, feels like we're not screwing somebody who like just really wanted to run a restaurant RIP kind of website. Does that answer the question?
I think so. That does wrap it up for our questions and our time here. Thanks for coming on the podcast. This was a really fun jaunt into all things hosting, and I hope we're all just hosting everything on Raspberry Pis in the future using Disco. That would be a great future to have. So thanks for coming on.
Awesome.
Hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bye.
Yeah, thanks. We appreciate having y'all. Sorry about my network connections. It's been really rough today.
Oh, no.
Oh, good. Yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, Disco looks awesome. Excited about the self-hosting feature. Really like your site design too. It's very like clean and classic. Love it. So folks are interested in checking out disco.cloud, you can check it out for yourself.
Thank you.